I'm not very good in tough love.
Welcome to PhD2go, the podcast for PhD students in the natural sciences in Göttingen.
Happy New Year and welcome to our third episode of PhD2go. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. PhD2go, a principal investigator in the Institute of Pharmacology and Toxicology. Dr. PhD2go is also involved in the research training group RTG 2824, Heart and Brain Diseases Integrative Research Across Organs, funded by the German Research Foundation, or the DFG. I hope to have an interesting discussion on what exactly is needed to be a PhD student working on a successful PhD project. So thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for the kind invitation and also for the kind introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
So I've reached out to a few of my closest friends who have actually just recently finished their PhD, and I've also reached out to some newly made friends that have just started the PhD to kind of get a gist of what is needed to know about becoming a PhD student in a project. And that's why I'm really glad to have you here today. And the first question I'd like to start off with is, so what exactly would you expect, or what exactly would you want a student to bring along to your lab in order to be successful?
Mm-hmm. This is a very good question. It depends, I would say, more in the time when they are entering the lab. It's different if they enter in a stage of a master thesis, in a bachelor thesis, for a practicum, or for a PhD. It's obvious that for a PhD we're looking for people that actually have mastered some skills that we would need for the project. Of course, we welcome people that also don't have these skills, but if you have good candidates, then of course you go down to the skills they're having to see whether this would be a better fit or not. But if we're starting for an earlier stage career, typically we also get people that do not have a lot of experience, and we are trying to train them in. So we work with stem cells, and the first thing that students need to learn is to work, of course, in cell culture and to be able to work with stem cells reproducibly and having a good quality of cells, because this is the alpha and the omega of everything we do. So at the end of the day, it really depends on the stage, but the main thing that we're looking for, or I'm looking for in a student, is love and motivation for science. The thing that sparks you is to see that they really want to do this, and they join your lab because they're fascinated with this project. I think this is what we mainly look for.
Absolutely, and I think that is something that you probably are able to see in an interview type of setting. So not necessarily on a CV. Of course, you can see what type of technical experience they have, but really getting to sit down with someone and ask them a few questions about what their passions are and what they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, very nice. Specifically during the selection process, so for example, the interview that you would have with a student that you're looking to potentially take on for a PhD project, what are you looking for?
I would say one of the first things would be to evaluate what did they take from their master thesis. Mm-hmm. It's not really the data, it's typically a short amount of time, but what did they love about the project? Where did they struggle with the project? How much understanding, how they stand behind their data, understand the limitations of their models. So little aspects, understanding your project, where did it stand in the bigger picture of the lab that was doing obviously a much larger project than this. So at the end, it's their understanding of the project. This is one of the things that I would start with, and typically the things I focused on. I think this is really depending from PI to PI. I typically look for that. The second thing I would ask is probably, how do they handle difficulties? And one of the reasons we're asking is because when you're doing our sort of experiments are very long-term, and long-term cultures, a lot of things can go wrong, and typically it's not easy for students. It's magnificent. It's crazy cool to watch the organoids and study them. However, you still have always to struggle with having 2 to 4 months culture, and it's good to know that they are able, and they should know that they are able to handle it. And the last thing I would say is that we are looking at is if it would fit in the team. So first thing is we would have our interview, but I typically like also to include members of the group in the interview processes when I can, because at the end they have to fit. They have to fit with the group, to collaborate, to communicate, and this is extremely important. The techniques is secondary. In my experience, students uptake techniques, and the better they come in contact and they merge with the group, the easier it is for them to learn, and easier it is then for the group to teach them. So it's kind of a win-win situation. So if they can integrate with the group and they love what they do and they are robust, not to be shocked with having to wait 3 months to get the first set of data, then I would say this is a good candidate.
Very good. So basically how their personal experience was during the master thesis, the struggles, understanding the story and the bigger picture of that experience, and then also being able to be patient, but also endure challenges throughout the experiment process and the cell culture process, for example, as well as being able to integrate into the team and into the group and be a team player. So how would you describe the structure or the designation of tasks between the different members in your group?
So there are 2 different aspects to this. The one thing is, of course, the projects of the student, and then you can consider how closely related they are. And the second thing is, of course, technical, and who's doing which techniques. Are they all doing the same, or are they specialized somehow? So from the first aspect, from project-wise, the students, what I typically like to do is have them actually in pretty different projects, and this is something I could handle so far. So almost every of my students is having kind of his own organoid niche. To be honest, slowly it looks like more people will be going inside a single project, and this is something I really have to take care of, because I don't want to have a competitive feeling between the team members. So I think it's important that you have a good separation of each project so that each PhD student feels comfortable, even if it is on the same subject. Now, technique-wise, almost every student is responsible for a specific technique. So we have tried different ways. Right now we are there where we say, well, one student will be responsible for showing how you make CRISPR designs. Another student is responsible for singularization. Another student is responsible for immunofluorescence and confocal microscopy. And another student, for example, may be doing flow cytometry. So we kind of divided the techniques. So when new members come, we have assigned different techniques to different people. And typically the PhD students kind of have to have the overview of all of these techniques, if it's part of the project, of course. And then the younger students should go to them and are assigned to learn specific techniques that they would need then for their project. So, and we have also some technical assistants, and they are responsible mainly for stem cell culture or for brain organoid generation. But typically they work on projects and support the PhD students and not the master students. So the master students have to learn how to do the stuff, going through their learning curve, and then do the things on their own.
Absolutely. I think that's, at least from the student perspective, that it's really important to, from your first point, to say that it's necessary to kind of have that division between projects a bit, because we need to develop pride for that subject, for those techniques. But also going back to your second point about the different dynamics in your group, where you kind of have a point person for everyone to go to for certain techniques. It's also really, really important, and I'm glad to hear that you have that set up in your group that way.
Yeah, I think it is helping a bit the students when they know who they go to. I understand it's not easy. We are also still figuring it out, because I'm relatively young group leader. So I right now have 4 PhD students. Back in 2020, I was alone. So, but I think at this stage, I can say it works well when the students know who they go to and then from whom they could get this information. And they know this from the beginning. So I have a list that they kind of know who they would have to go to. And of course, they typically have to come to me for some techniques as well, like multi-electrode array and so on and so forth. So there are things that they would anyway get directly from me.
Sure, and I can only imagine just how busy you are from week to week. And so if every student came to you to learn every single technique, that would be nearly impossible. So yeah.
It's impossible, but it is still very important for me, and I'm sure this is the same for every group leader, to be in contact constantly also with the young students and the PhD. So we have a typical group meeting every week for 2 hours where we discuss general things and the students present their progress and their struggles, because it's also part of the PhD. And every Friday I have 1 hour meeting slots that the students can book. And on that day, then I can specifically discuss their projects with each and every one of them. Some of these slots sometimes are confocal because they have questions related. So it could also be technique-wise, or they can ask me, tell me, okay, I will go to cell culture more or less every day in the week that they require help. But I think it is important not only to have discussions once a week where they present progress, but also to have discussions, in-depth discussions about where your project is going, publications, and conferences you're going to meet, and so on and so forth.
Sure, and also to help solve problems before they become too difficult.
And sometimes you also cannot solve the problems, right? There can be people coming to me and say, I have this technical problem. It doesn't mean I have all the solutions, but what I should be able to tell you is to whom you should go to that can give you a solution. So I think this is very important, that a group leader should be able to facilitate this, even if this is not my expertise.
If you were approached by a student applying for a position in your lab and they were to ask you questions regarding, financial plans or the financial future plans and potential opportunities for publications, how would you respond to that student, or what would you like to express about those two very specific points in academia?
So what I typically do, the projects I give PhD students typically stem from a grant, obviously, and they typically have fixed aims, which of course can be more explorative during a PhD thesis.
Sure.
And of course, at least in my eyes, every work and all the effort you put during your PhD has to result into something that makes you also happy, and then that brought science further. So as a supervisor, I think it's my duty to have this as a priority, that all of my students get a publication out of their PhD. A smaller one or a bigger one, depending, of course, how their project went, because we don't know how projects will run. But it is very important. At the end of the day, this is something that goes inside your CV and something that you should have. And it's kind of also of a self-validation to see also how the world thinks of your work. And I think it is extremely important. And I would like to do that. And I hope I manage it for all of my students. Of course, it cannot always be in these 3 years, if it's a strict 3 years. But if it's a 4-year PhD, I I think the publication is still manageable to be during the PhD time or at the end of it. So, but everyone should have a publication afterwards. That would be my aim.
I completely agree that is probably also something that the PhD students are looking forward to contributing to as well, and putting that into the works. But I mean, keeping it in reality, keeping it in a certain mind frame, with the logistics of actually publishing a manuscript and going through revisions and yeah.
I think what could be also a little bit different between supervisors and students, and sometimes the students have the urgency to publish, and it's okay also if they do not publish a lot of the data, if they just make a little publication out of it. Sometimes the supervisors have larger ideas and they want to integrate the data from here and there and make something bigger. Because I think at the end of the day, the data of everyone are published and are part of something. But I think what probably the question is, can I always just publish everything individually so that the student is happy? That sometimes doesn't work. So sometimes you need to clarify, the students need to know, you need to plan with them. So I have a PhD student now that she's closer to finishing, wrapping up papers, discussing, and we're discussing, okay, you need one paper for your PhD to have it published. So this could be the first paper, it would be maybe a bit smaller, the second paper would be a bigger one. So I think it needs quite a lot of planning, but I think if it is done with a student, then it is a good communication point that you're saying, this is what I hope for this project. I think it can be published like that, and this project like that, and then you can discuss it to find an understanding that is satisfying from both ways.
You've mentioned that this point of communication several times throughout our discussion, and I think it's a really important aspect that is necessary between a PI and between a PhD student, master student, bachelor student, anybody that's learning really. So would you think that is a key characteristic in your relationship within your team, is just constantly communicating, not bombarding with questions, for example, but just an open line of communication between you and your team?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, and I hope, in my eyes, I think this is what we have, and I hope this is the case. We actually, not only to the point of discussing how do we publish and how do we do, but sometimes, I'm getting WhatsApps, people are excited, they get good results and they send me a WhatsApp, and then I'm also super happy, so I think it is a communication at every level, and I really like it that we are close. For me, it feels the kids in the lab is like my lab kids. I always say I have my kids at home and I have my lab kids, so it is for me another family.
Sure, you bond over science and the project, of course, but you also get to know each other on a personal level, and you go through so many challenges over the years.
Exactly. It's exactly how you say, you go through this together. And I think if the student also knows we're doing this together, is a different feeling. So when you do this together, yes, it's a struggle, but we will go through it.
Yeah,
exactly. Not everything in a PhD is wonderful and work like a charm. Sometimes it does, and it's like a miracle, but most of the times it takes a bit more effort.
Sure, but having that line of support, knowing that there is a principal investigator, a supervisor that is there to kind of help you handle the stress and the challenges, not completely take over that from you, because that's something that we need to learn as students to be able to continue into our careers, but knowing that there is actually somebody there to talk about it with and to work through it with. So my next question is it more like having a job where you work in a certain project and can earn experience from it, or is it more like a bachelor's or a master's program where you're studying? Because it's different in different countries. Yeah. I know for sure that, for example, in Switzerland or maybe Austria, it's a bit more of like on the studying side of things, whereas here you're in the lab.
It's a qualification step.
Yeah,
it's a qualification stage.
Okay.
So you're paid, but this is not really a job. No, this is clear. So
okay.
It is. It should be a love for you get a little bit of recognition by being able to survive.
Yeah, but Branimir said growth possibilities, are they micromanagers or loose cannons? I think we'll leave that out.
I can answer you. I think this is an integral part of the PhD. I think at the last years, especially the third year, also this is where you see the change of the student, and you slowly see the transformation from the PhD to the postdoc. And you see then they are having a lot of ideas, passion, all the data come together. And I think this is the stage where they need to get freedom. Yeah, I always urge my students when they are good inside their PhD to have independent ideas, and I suggest them that I can guide them and help them, because at the end of the day, they probably would like to start trying to organize something on their own, to be able to have their own mini project that they came up with. I don't think it's easy in the beginning because you need to make sure you have enough data to finish. So you cannot just start by doing something that is completely out of the project. But while you're doing the project, 100% you will get really a lot of ideas. I think it's good still because the student is still learning. If there is a discussion, so when they organize experiments, that they still may come to you, maybe you have a suggestion that may make it easier, or maybe you ask for a specific control that they may not have thought of, just as a discussion, which is different. It's not that you are setting up the experiment, they are setting up everything, the mini project, and then they can get their own student, and then they can have their own development, that they can become a mini supervisor. I think I'm giving the opportunity to the PhD students also to co-supervise with me as students, so that they see how much effort also lies behind. How is it when I have to correct a thesis? How easy is it? Or how much effort do you have to put in to design experiments, to guide people? It's not only about showing them techniques and explain them the whole project you're working on. I think these are important things the students should do. Now, how much would I intervene with a student during their experiments? I think really depends on the student. I'm kind of feeling I'm trying to balance it out. Sometimes you have students that they're very confident, they don't come so much to you to discuss about the data, or they are not stressed at all about their progress. Then you're like looking at the progress and saying, maybe we should meet more, maybe we should really set how is it, what is your progress, So I'm trying to balance it out. If I have a student that is super stressed, it's probably going to be, okay, I think this is not so critical, let's discuss this. So typically my take is I try not to do too much, but if I see that a student is not really stressed, or not really, maybe I shouldn't say stressed, but if I see that the student is really relaxed, when I think we should have progress, then I kind of go like a mayday. Okay, we have to set this up. We cannot stay indefinitely.
Goes off.
Yeah, because at some point, you have no more time.
Sure.
But initially there is more supervision, and slowly you feel it. They don't require it, and when they don't require it, they don't come. They won't book, or this will reduce a lot.
Mm-hmm. So allowing or facilitating that independence really also allows them to gain their confidence, and will help transition them into the next phase of their career.
Exactly. You termed it very nice. It's exactly how it is. It's because we want that once they finish their PhD, they will become a postdoc. And then they will have to learn how to deal with a lot of things. And it's good coming up with ideas. It's the main thing. Creativity, and then organizing a proper experiment. And this is something that is really inherent part of the PhD.
Absolutely. I think that was a very fruitful discussion. You helped give a lot of perspective to hopefully the new incoming students. And thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to sit down and answer several questions about this topic.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me here. And it was actually a very nice discussion, and time went so fast. It was great chatting with you.
Karen,
thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
Good luck with all of your endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much.